for joining us on our last session for the day. We have Keith with us from Bexar County Vets. They cover a lot of ground, so I'm not going to take up too much of his time. And looking forward to hearing what you got.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yes, sir.
So thank y'all for letting me join. I'll tell y'all, when they invited me out, they said I got 2.5 hours. They also warned me that I was like the last thing of the day. So I swore that I would cut it down, pare it down. So I'm down to 2 hours. I sent my slide deck ahead. I think I've got about 48 different slides, but I forgot my thumb drive. And so we're going to skip the slides today. So I think we can even get it less than 2 hours. So I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk. Just in the group here, how many veterans are in the room? So everyone, just about. So appreciate y'all's service. Look forward to kind of telling you what we're doing here in Bexar County. And then to the group that's listening live, hopefully to share some common experiences that we've probably often had as veterans. Talk about some of the resources that we have at Bexar County, and then answer any questions. So I'll talk a little bit and then open it up for any questions. And I don't know if there are mechanisms for those online to feed questions. Happy to take those or to do some sort of follow-up. So Keith Wilson, Bexar County Department of Military and Veteran Services. Is everyone from Texas that's in the room? Anyone not from Texas? Okay, so a handful. So Bexar County has approximately 173,000 veterans per the VA's last estimate in 2024. It makes us the largest county in the state for veterans, and it makes us the 4th largest county in the country for veterans. So we have a huge veteran presence. We have a huge military presence. Joint Base San Antonio is the largest military presence outside the capital region, with all of our joint bases at Lackland, Randolph, Fort Sam, Camp Bullis, and then you include some of the National Guard over at Martindale Field. You get a large military presence. The county has recognized the value that our veterans and our military families bring to the community. So they put a lot of energy and resources into keeping those individuals here when they choose to leave the military as members of our community, as members of our county. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the county does, but I want to start out with something I used to do when I was in the Army. And I'll give you a little bit of my background as well. So I grew up in San Antonio. I was born in Houston, but moved here when I was 9 years old, and San Antonio became home. It has been home ever since. Graduated from high school and went off to the military academy, where I spent 4 years, got my commission as an armor officer or tanks in the United States Army. And I did 25 years of active duty. Before I left Texas to go off to the military academy, I'd only ever left the state once in my life. And that was to visit the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, the junior year of, my junior year of high school, to see the Air Force Academy. And so I went from a kid that had really never left Texas to one who's traveled across the country and around the world because of my time in the military. I know there are a lot of veterans that have those similar types of experiences and what the military allows us to do. Did 25 years active duty and then retired and had the opportunity to transition right into this job with the county running the Veterans Services Department. And I'll talk a bit about that later on. My last job in the Army was a program called the Army Soldier for Life program. So we used to go into communities. We were assigned under the Headquarters Department of Army, assigned to the Chief of Staff of the Army's office as a special program. And we would go into communities to learn about programs and resources that support service members that are getting out, veterans, and their families. This program came about in the kind of 2011, 2012 timeframe. Some of y'all may have remembered and some of y'all may have experienced, there's a period when the military was going through a pretty drastic downsizing, very rapid. And there were stories, particularly from the Air Force, about individuals that were forward deployed getting their notices that they were going to be separated in a relatively short period of time. And they had very little time to prepare for that separation. And so in the 2010, 11, 12 timeframe, what we saw were tens of thousands of service members leaving the military with no transition plan. A lot of programs were in place that in the Army, it used to be called ACAP. And they were kind of designed to help you transition, but frankly, wasn't worth the salt, right? And so a lot of individuals got out ill-prepared and struggled finding jobs. And so the unemployment rate skyrocketed. At one point, almost 13%, if not a little over 13% of the veteran population were unemployed. And so what happens is you go and you collect your unemployment benefits, right? Collect those benefits from the state. The state recoups those from the previous employer. So the Department of Defense was paying out hundreds of millions of dollars in recouped unemployment costs to the states. The Army was paying almost $500 million a year out of operational funds towards unemployment costs for service members who had separated, not prepared for that transition. And so at the time, Chief of Staff of the Army, General Odierno, put this program in place to go out and educate the community on veterans, the value of veterans in the workforce, the resources and the skills that the military provides to individuals to train and develop them to become producers of, activities, work, all the different, from welding to maintaining to leading, and bring those out into the workforce. And so what we saw was a significant increase in awareness of the value of veterans. We saw a decrease in unemployment in veterans, and the Army realized we had a great program and continued to run it. And so when I joined, we had kind of gotten over that unemployment focus and put our emphasis on kind of the holistic support and care for service members as they transition. So we'd go into communities to learn about the programs and then bring those back to the Army. And so a few things that we learned as I went out there, and I carried a lot of this forward as I came into this role. One, there's a wealth of services and resources available in most communities to support veterans. Now, smaller communities, obviously it's limited, and so you have to kind of expand out to where you can get that support and service from. One of the biggest challenges that we see from all those organizations is they will say veterans come to us when they're in crisis. They come to us when something has already happened catastrophic and they're now having to deal with it. And so now that organization is in a reactive mode, trying to reduce the crisis versus if they'd been able to engage early to prevent it or at least mitigate it so it wasn't as critical a crisis. In the Army, I went through a period of time, many of y'all may have remembered the counter IED emphasis that we had in Iraq and Afghanistan to reduce IEDs. And we would talk about getting left of boom and how do you prevent the IEDs from occurring in the same place. We take the same approach in working with our veterans. How do we mitigate and prevent crisis from occurring before it has occurred? And that could be as simple as helping find a job. It could be as simple as helping find how to connect with housing resources so they can use their VA loan to find a place to live in an area of town that they want to live, etc. And so as I traveled around in the Army, we talked to individuals, and I traveled with our training and doctrine commander at the time, a guy named General Paul Funk. And General Funk used to ask individuals when they were re-enlisting why they joined the Army. And so I started carrying this with me as I went around and talked, why do you join the military? And I commanded a basic training unit at Fort Benning for a couple of years. And I would talk to the brand new privates, why did you join the Army? And the question or the answers that I typically got from these young men and then eventually women as we integrated genders, it ran the gamut, right? So you got these 17, 18-year-old kids explaining to the commander, one of, at the time, the most senior folks they've probably seen in the military to date, right? This lieutenant colonel that's, not high in the whole scheme of things, but in these minds are. And say, well, okay, why'd you join? And so it ran from, I had this selfless desire to serve my country. You're like, man, you're 19 years old. Was that really, at the forefront of your mind? Some of them were, I wanted to do more than that which would have been done before. And you're like, okay, that's okay. Sounds noble. Good. What else? I was like, okay, how many signed up to go to college? And you see the crickets or hear crickets, right? And you're like, okay, look, I was raised by a single mom, my sister and I, in Texas. I didn't know what my path to college was going to be. I chose a path through a military academy that gave me a free education. So that's okay. So how many joined for college? You start seeing hands go up. How many of you are, parents or spouses, and you're joining the military for the income, to put food on the table and clothes on your family's back? And you see a couple of hands start to raise. And you realize that there's this fear of showing an extrinsic desire to join the military. They felt that it needed to be all about what's inside you, right? And I said, look, people join for different reasons. They join for college. They join to get out of bad environments. Sometimes it's to escape a bad home. Sometimes to escape a bad neighborhood. Sometimes to escape a bad community. And they're looking for an escape. Sometimes it's to care for family, right? We had one kid that came to our basic training unit. His family was living in a shelter in New York City. And he left them there so that he could join the military, get into the service, and then have a place for his family to live where he knew they'd be cared for. He knew they'd have medical coverage. He knew that the kids would have access to schools. So he was making that. He knew the sacrifice of leaving his family in a shelter short term was going to be worth the dividends of getting into a place supported through the military. We found out while he was there that his son, he had a teenage son with some intellectual challenges and had been kicked out of the shelter. And so he got a Red Cross message that his family had been kicked out of the shelter in New York City and needed help. So now you have a brand new private, right? So we looked to the leadership, and it could have easily, the company leadership could have easily said, well, soldier didn't have a soldier family, a family plan, didn't make all the right steps to take care of his family. That's his responsibility. What our leadership did is reached out to the Army Emergency Relief Fund, figured out how to get him a grant, reached out to our human resource manager who works assignments to get him assigned, or get the soldier assigned to Fort Polk, Louisiana as his follow-on station where they had some family at. We reached out to the installation garrison command sergeant major who allowed us to get housing for the service member who hadn't even graduated basic training so that he could move his family. And then we got his family on a bus because of all the property. That was the best means of transportation. But on a bus down to Louisiana, where the gaining unit of the soldier who had not yet even graduated basic received the family and got them into housing. And so that was taking care of our families. So the reason people join is often tied to those material extrinsic motivations. Then the question that the general would ask during re-enlistments is, why are you staying? And that was always an important decision for me, and one of the most important ceremonies for me as a commander was a re-enlistment ceremony. Because I could talk to the soldiers and say, when you joined and that recruiter was telling you a story, sometimes there's a little less, I don't want to say less than honest. There's some exaggeration on opportunities or a minimization of experiences that recruiters may or may not tell sometimes. We have great recruiters, don't get me wrong. Poetic license, yes, sir. But now you've experienced it, right? And this was a period of time when you joined the military and you knew you were going to go to Iraq or Afghanistan, maybe both, and maybe multiple times. And people were enlisting by the droves. So I would say, look, you didn't necessarily know what you're getting to when you enlisted, but you know now what you're signing up to keep doing. Why do you sign up? Why do you stay in? And every one of them, it was no longer about income. It was no longer about college. It was no longer about taking care of family. It was about taking care of their unit. It was about those that they were serving with. It was about the experiences and opportunities that they had been given through the time in the military. So now you see this shift from these extrinsic motivations and outside influences on why people join the military. And don't get me wrong, there are many that join for truly altruistic, good reasons. But there are many that do it to escape, to have benefits, etc. But then you ask why you stay, and a large number of them now shifts to this desire to keep doing, to keep serving, to do more. And so then the question became, what do you do when you get out of the military? And that's where we put some emphasis on now in my last program and now in the department with the county is, how do you decide what you do when you leave the military? I had a chance probably now about 2 or 3 months ago to speak with the chief of psychology for the VA system down here, South Texas VA healthcare system. He said, Keith, you know the number one reason why veterans come in to seek behavioral health treatment from the VA? And sometimes your immediate response, and maybe less so now as we've kind of disengaged from the combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, but many would associate with combat-related stress, experiences, etc. He said the number one reason why veterans are coming to the VA for behavioral health treatment is loss of identity and loss of purpose when they leave the military. So when you're in the military, you're surrounded by all these individuals that have the same kind of mentality, and you're layered with resources, you're layered with leadership, you have training schedules and uniforms, and everything's structured, and you kind of know where to go, when you're supposed to be there, what you're supposed to be in, what you're supposed to be doing. And if you don't know, someone's going to tell you and make sure you're doing it. You're in trouble if you don't, like all these different pieces. And you build something. As much as we complain and we get frustrated about it while we're in, when you leave, sometimes that sense of camaraderie and that sense of what it's like to be in the bad situations, but surrounded by folks that are just doing their best to get out of it and keep each other alive. There's something that you can't replicate very easily in the civilian world. And so when people leave the military, finding that sense of identity and that sense of purpose is a challenge for some. And so, and that carries in, I think, to the discussions this week on small business ownership and what opportunities might be there, whatever other paths individuals may take. And so as we work with individuals that are transitioning out of the military or have transitioned out of the military, we will talk to them about, one, what their experiences were like while they were in the military, kind of what are you looking to replicate, but also what are your interests, right? Where do you see yourself? And then how do we build a path to get there? I noticed as I was walking in, there's a program called Empower that's got some tables downstairs. And they provide education and training in computer programming and other kind of tech-related fields. And they're a great partner of ours that we send folks to because there are a lot of individuals that are interested in getting into tech and they don't know the paths. And so we use partners like them and others. And so figuring out, how do you define yourself? How do you see yourself in 5, 10, 15 years as you leave the military? For some, and many veterans in here, for some, you can leave the military and it is a true separate chapter of your life, right? You take the uniform off. I tell folks, right, you can walk into campus and you'll see someone that's, dressed to the nine, looks like a college student, your typical college student. You'll never guess that they're a veteran. Then you can see the guys like me, and I keep looking at you with the beard, or for some, the attempt at a beard, the rolled ball cap, right? Sunglasses on our hats. I'm a big cargo pants kind of guy. My Solomon shoes, right? So there are some where you just like my 9 line or my grunt style t-shirts, right? So there's some you're like 100% that's a veteran, right? And then others that you're like zero idea that person would be a veteran. Some leave that alone and never look back. Others cling to it because it's such an important part of who they are, how they become who they are, and in many ways, kind of what they want to be, right? Continuing to be part of a team, continuing to serve others, continuing to do something more than just, for yourself. I'm not a person that can sit in a computer, in a cubicle, nugging on a computer all day. I'm so grateful that there are people that can and that do that because I know it's needed and I value those people significantly, but I'm not wired to be one of those. And so working with individuals as they get out and figuring out, where is your path to happiness going to take you? And that'll get into some of these discussions, and I'll circle back here in a minute on kind of tied to entrepreneurship. So what does our department do? So by law, the state of Texas requires any county that has a total population over 200,000 people to have a county veteran service office to help with VA claims. And so by law, we have to have our department to help file VA claims. So a big chunk of what we do is working with veterans, with service members as they're getting out, and with family members, particularly surviving spouses, to file for their VA disability and compensation claims. So that's a big chunk of what we do. I talked about how the county recognizes the value that our veterans and our family members bring to the community. So they have kind of charged us with and put some emphasis on transitioning military. So I've got another section of my team that we call the Employment and Transition Services. And they're focused predominantly on transitioning service members, those leaving Fort Sam, Randolph, and Lackland, and working with individuals that anticipate staying in Bexar County to connect to employment and education paths for when they get out. We are seeing some increased opportunities under the transition window, if you will, to expand beyond just transitioning military. We put a lot of emphasis recently on homeless veterans. I was surprised when I got here, the number of homeless veterans that are out in our streets. Compared to other communities, our homeless numbers are relatively small. The veteran population is pretty representative of what we see in other locations. But in my mind, if you've got any veterans that are living out on the streets homeless, we need to be working to figure out how do we get them out, because there are resources available for them. So we're looking at transition from homelessness as a path that we can put some emphasis in. Incarcerated veterans. Here in Bexar County, we started tracking numbers through a recent statute that helps us with some of the data collection. For the month of September, Bexar County brought in about 4,100 new inmates to the county jail. 4,100. Of those, a little over 200, is about 220 were veterans. So it was about 5% of the new intake of jail prisoners were veterans. And it runs the gamut from types of charges and et cetera. And so as we started talking with individuals, we were able to do an assessment on about 40 of those. Many had already been released pretty quickly through bond or other mechanisms, diversions and whatnot. We were able to do a assessment on 40 of them. Of the 40 that we did, 90-something% said that they were homeless or facing eviction or living in transitional or some sort of temporary housing. About the same percentage didn't have a job, no income. And so now we're working with individuals and we're starting to identify these. As you look at transitions, here's another opportunity for us to put some emphasis on transition from incarceration to release. And what does that look like? And how do we help individuals get out of jail into a positive path that keeps them from getting back into jail? So our employment and transition services, though historically is focused on transitioning from the military, we're looking at opportunities where we can expand that out to cover some of those other areas because we see that need there. We have 2 grant-funded programs funded by the state through the state's Texas Veterans Commission, which is our kind of equivalent of a state VA, if you will. They have a Fund for Veterans Assistance program that is funded by the lottery system. For individuals, when you go and you register your car, there's a option to donate a certain amount to the Veterans Assistance Fund or Fund for Veterans Assistance. That goes into it. You get a hunting license from the state. You're asked if you want to donate to the Fund for Veterans Assistance. That goes into there. There are a number of different mechanisms that fund this, and then they disperse it out through grants to counties, to nonprofit organizations, et cetera. So we have 2 grant-funded programs in the county. One is a financial assistance program, and one is a peer support program. Our financial assistance program, for our first grant year, we awarded almost $300,000 in direct assistance here in our community. About 70% of that money went to housing assistance. That was paying people's rent, paying people's mortgages, oftentimes in arrears, so money that they had owed or fallen behind on. In some cases, literally going to eviction court and advocating to the judge and the landlord to let us pick up the costs, cover the bills, get them ahead, and then get them in a place where they would be okay and able to maintain that. And we're able to keep them in their homes, We also have utility assistance, so we can cover water, electricity, wells, septic systems, internet, cell phones. And so oftentimes helping keep water on or water running, keep lights on. During this last winter, we were working with the energy company to actually turn on individuals' power that had been cut off by paying for what they owed and then working to keep them kind of ahead of things. So we tell folks we're keeping people in their homes with the lights on and the water running. $300,000, all of that direct assistance here in the county. And we've been renewed and we'll have that again for this next grant year. The other program we have is a peer support program. So I talked about some of the challenges that veterans face when they leave the military, staying connected, that sense of purpose, that sense of self. And so what we find with a lot of individuals when they leave is there's this inherent desire for many to somehow stay connected to that community. I'm very blessed in the nature of this role. I get to be involved in talking with veterans, talking with active military, talking with families. So I don't feel that gap. Others that get out and go into some other role that are maybe not as tied to the military community or the veteran community can feel disconnected. So our peer support programming does activities that range from hunting and fishing to axe throwing, hikes. We've done rage rooms. We've done pottery, painting. We do one where we go out to this, it's called Small Acres Farm. They've got a couple of horses. We do equine therapy. So it's kind of caring for the horses, taking responsibility for the care of these horses. and then transitioning over and doing a painting led by an artist. And it's fun. It's sort of like the painting with a twist concept. And you see a variety of artistic talent that range from good to not as good. But it's not about the activity. And that's what I tell leadership. When all said and done, it's not about the activity that we're doing. It's the fact that they're getting together with other veterans that speak the language, that understand what each other have been through, and can share and discuss things. We have some individuals that have literally done every event and activity that we've scheduled because they enjoy spending time and hanging out with each other. Some of them are as simple as a hike through one of the local parks with your pets. Show up on a Saturday, bring your dog. Many times the dogs somehow get carried. Some of them should be walking, but it allows them to get out and spend time together, which is great. That's another one that we've been renewed and we'll do another year of. We've been able to take that program into the jail and work with our incarcerated veterans, running individual sessions, group sessions, talking about responsibilities when you get out and how you're going to manage things, how you're going to deal with the stresses of what's going on in your life that has got you into jail, and how you're going to move past that with the tools and resources you need so when you get released, you're prepared to move back into society in some sort of productive way. So those are kind of our key programs and services that we offer. One of the things I want to kind of zero in on for a second is tied to the kind of entrepreneurship paths that we've identified, and then I'll stop and open up for questions for folks that may have some. One of the things that we realized as we get out working with individuals that are transitioning from the military, that have transitioned, is this increased desire to be small business owners. And so oftentimes what we get is an individual says, I want to run my own business. I just don't know where to start. I don't know what's available. I don't know how to do it, etc. And so in the past, what we've tried to do is, okay, well, let's start and see if we can cobble together some resources for you. The county has a small business office, and they've got some access to resources. They put a lot of emphasis on individuals and organizations that want to get into government contracting, specifically at kind of the local government level. But they've been a great tool for us. The Texas Veteran Commission has some resources. But what I realized was there's no single location or kind of repository of resources. Similar to what I discussed earlier, right? There's a whole lot out there. It's just how do you know what's good? How do you access them? And how do you navigate it? So you narrow that down into our small business resources. I'm very generalizing things, small business resources. And there's a lot of them out there. And I know some have been part of the sessions to date and coming up. And so one of the things that we did was reach out to some of the key partners and say, look, let's talk about what kind of the glide path to small business ownership looks like, and who's doing workshops and resources. Where are the gaps? How do we fill those gaps? And then how do we point people to those to navigate? So we started with kind of the very basic, like, hey, I think I want to run my own business. That's all I know. Okay, here's your kind of small business 101. We'll talk into, is that truly what you want to do, or do you really want something else? What does it involve? What does it take, et cetera? And then somewhere in there's the, business plan developments, market analysis, and there are folks that do that. And then these discussions, okay, do I want to truly start my own business from scratch? Do I want to take over some other business that maybe exists and I'm just acquiring that and assuming responsibility? Do I want to be a franchisee and purchase into a bigger piece? And maybe there's some variations, and there are pros and cons, and there are challenges and opportunities for every one of those, right? But knowing where that individual wants to be and then navigating. And so what we've started doing is bringing in some of our partners from the state, from the Small Business Administration, from some of the local community partners that provide training and workshops, and say, let's put these together. And I think we have another session coming up this week to formulate it, because what we realized is there are some gaps when financing was one of the big ones. How do you raise capital? And there's some programs that can talk it, but who do you go to get capital? And so we're trying to help fill the gap. We look forward to working with the team here on broadening that to whatever extent that we can, making sure we're kind of targeting the right audience, if you will, and addressing the right needs, and not to necessarily try to create something new. The Lord knows we don't need new things necessarily, but how do you find the right ones that are doing well and doing it right and that are advantageous for those that are looking for help and don't feel predatorial when you start engaging with them, and get them connected. So that's kind of what we're working on. Like I said, the county has some resources. Every year, the county's small. Is Renee Watson part of this in any form or fashion? I thought. Okay, so Renee Watson runs our small business department for the county, and every year she runs a huge small business conference in November. I'm sorry, I think it's December. Early December.
It is.
First week of December. We get a lot of great resources, again, really geared towards those that want to go into kind of local government contracting and learn the ins and outs of it and how to either come in as a prime or a subprime, which is oftentimes more opportunistic. But it's a great opportunity to learn about some of the county's specific programming and resourcing. So I know I've talked about a lot. We've kind of covered a whole lot. The department, I think, does a whole lot. But happy to answer any questions that may be from the group here, or anyone. Do we have the ability to receive stuff from people online?
I have some questions. I have
yeah, sure.
the mic here. So thanks for bringing up local government contracting. So Supplies A, right? Bear County is one of the entities participating in Supplies A. So it's really larger 14 agencies that is part of that. So there is an opportunity to be connected and then go into local contracting. And we're partnering with Bear County on that. What I wanted to ask you, Keith, is you do more than just entrepreneurship. When we think about as a small business owner and as a veteran, you need holistic care, possibly, right? A number of resources, not just for entrepreneurship. As a entrepreneur in Bear County, what are some of the other services that you offer that can assist me in navigating that journey? So
yeah, no, it's a great comment, and I think one of the things that we have really started looking at is kind of that holistic, or I call it the comprehensive services, a whole of government approach. So I think you kind of run in the different needs, right? You know, I think of like the whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs, whatever. But are you in adequate housing, right? A place where you got a place to lay your head tonight and next week and next month, and you're comfortable for you, your family, whatever that entails, right? And if not, then we have resources inherent within the department, but also with community partners to help with that. For many of that, are there any current small business owners in here? In some aspect, so a handful. So many know, right? Oftentimes it's not just jump into it and suddenly the money's flowing and everything's going, right? Oftentimes it's not uncommon to have some kind of other job to put some money in the bank while you're figuring out your endeavors, you're pursuing your entrepreneurial ambitions. So for some individuals, it's how do I get a job that allows me the flexibility and freedom I want or need to pursue this other endeavor of small business ownership? And what would that look like? Individuals that want to use their education benefits, right? There's some great programming to get, whether it's training in, certifications in, degrees in, from accounting to marketing to, you name it. And so looking holistically at those pieces to say, okay, you want this startup, but you need a job, you need a place to live. You're dealing with a lot of, emotional challenges associated with all this. So there's probably some, opportunities, whether it's peer support, whether it's something more clinical. We don't make those assessments, but we can help identify and point to resources. So I think, to your point, recognizing that it's not just a simple plug A to B and be good. It's looking holistically. I think as a department, we've definitely gotten better at it. I think as a community, we've got some ways to go to put all those pieces together. But I know the resources are there.
I love that, because as we're trying to build community through VSource SA, right? Really, you're having a community of veteran and milestone entrepreneurs at a place to go, then to connect with you and the services you provide and other local, state, and national resources. Really trying to find this entire ecosystem where we're saying, here's the connective tissue, and here's a community for veteran entrepreneurs.
I often like to say, we provide both direct services and access indirectly to the other services. Kind of the indirect services be through referrals and whatnot. The state actually has funded the Texas Veterans Network. So the Texas Veterans Network is the state's official veterans referral program. So it's funded through the Texas Workforce Commission, and that is where kind of all official state referrals are supposed to go. We're still building it out. My county leadership has kind of given me the the directive and guidance and support that, hey, that's the state's system that's going to be sending resources and referrals. So we want to be part of that to receive those, but then also to push referrals into that system. So that's another one that, as y'all look at programming and resources and whatnot, if you're looking for veterans, if you want to capitalize on what the state has already created and put into place, the Texas Veterans Network is an option.
If someone is looking for you and your services, how do they reach out? I know your PowerPoints are down today, but is there a website that someone can go to?
We went out, I had our IT folks go out and get us an easy number, 210-HELP-VET. So that's our main line. That'll get you, there's a couple of little phone tree options for the VA's healthcare enrollment, us, and then crisis hotline. But 210-HELP-VET's the phone number. And then our website is BEXAR.org/vets, VETS. And that goes to our main department website. And then we got links off of there for our different services.
Awesome. Thank you. And I think we have some questions in the room. Any questions in the room?
You guys do so much. Like, where do you see the county being in vet services like 5 years, 10 years into the future?
I'd tell you, that's a tough one. And I had someone ask me about a year ago as we were adding these new grants. I said, where do you see the end state for the department? You're growing, you're adding. And where's the point where you think enough's enough and you're where the department needs to be? And I hadn't really thought about that. You know, I came in having never experienced work in the county, having never been in this role, of course, and kind of took that old, I'm just going to sit back and see how things are going and where to make change and what to, you know, or keep things going. And never really thought about what's the end state look like. And so what I told the individual, and it's a great question, and it's, I think, something that leaders should be thinking about. My concern is, I feel if I say here's an end state, that you start getting complacent and missing opportunities to be helpful. And so what I've said is, if there's a need that I think still needs to be met, or gap that I think still needs to be filled, and I think that we can somehow be impactful in doing that, whether it's us or bringing folks to the table, then I want to lean forward and do that. So I'm reluctant to say, here's where I want it to be, because then I'm afraid we say, okay, we got it, now we're good, and we miss opportunities to be helpful. If you had asked me 2 years ago if I thought we'd be engaged and involved in helping homeless veterans or incarcerated veterans, and that the problem would be as great as it is, I would have said no, because I didn't understand. I didn't know the problem out there. So we'll pivot. We'll focus on that, and hopefully put pieces in place. And then if we see that there's an opportunity to grow and expand or impact somewhere else that's impactful, then we will. I know that's a very easy around the question, but it's an important one, and I think it's something that's worth thinking about for sure.
Yeah, it's a good answer. Like, yeah, leadership needs to set the vision, but also be open. Like, from an entrepreneurial perspective, you set a vision for the company, but you have to be open to what the market's telling you. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I always tell my team, I see myself for the team having kind of three main responsibilities as an organizational leader. Set the strategic vision, give you the resources and opportunities to accomplish it, and then keep obstacles from getting in your way in doing that. And if I can do that and I've got the right people in place, then they're going to figure out all the rest. And so, you know, any kind of governmental entity, we always want more money. We always want more people. We always want, you know, and you got to balance that with what's available. But we've been very fortunate to, you know, fully transparent. Our county leadership's great. I don't say that just to blow smoke. We have a great community. Military is woven into our DNA in San Antonio. Bexar County, the Presidio de Bexar, was established by Spanish expeditionaries that came forward from Mexico now Mexico, to establish forts to prevent French incursion. And they set these forts, the Presidio de Bexar, to guard the missions, right? So the historic missions here. And so from that founding or that establishment, then this civilization kind of built around it, and has always had a military presence of some sort in our community. So I talk about DNA and how it's interwoven into ours. It truly is part of what made now San Antonio what it is.
I had a question around, we talk a lot about veteran entrepreneurs or for veterans. What about male spouses? We
Yeah.
had 2 male spouses here yesterday.
Yeah.
And we know that if you're an enlisted member, lower ranks coming up, you need 2 incomes, right? And then if you have a male spouse who wants to be an entrepreneur, there are a lot of challenges that community has that we don't often hear about resources. My
Yeah.
question to you, Keith, is that something you guys already have, are looking at? What are you guys working on?
No, that's great. And absolutely right. So the military, I think, has done exceptionally well at doing better for military spouses, particularly as it relates to the workforce and small business. Most of the programs and resources either that we offer or that we refer folks to include military spouse, some kind of military spouse component. Our financial assistance program is available for dependents, for spouses. Our peer support now is. I think there are unique opportunities for military spouses to create businesses that can move with them, right? There's challenges obviously inherent with that, but there are some great opportunities. The military is really doing yeoman's work to make it more convenient when you're stationed overseas to continue some of those programs. I didn't realize this until my last assignment with the Army, but a lot of the status of force agreements that allow us to be overseas in foreign countries like Germany, Italy, Korea, Japan, etc., have very strict limitations on running businesses on those installations that aren't taxed. I learned this when I was over visiting Italy. They're like, even DoD related, like the installations businesses, the pizza shops and Burger Kings, very tight on how they're run overseas. And in many cases, having a income earning small business operated out of a home on an installation overseas was prohibited by the SOFA agreements. And so they're rewording a lot of those to account for military spouses. Some of them that are running, the online clothing sales or whatever, boutique type shops out of their homes and then shipping. Because then you get into, now you've got, unique shipping costs because of the military shipping system. And so I know they're trying to count for that and to open that more broadly for spouses. And we try to orient a lot of our programs to be inclusive as well. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, just a couple online. So how soon should somebody in a transition period be reaching out to you?
So when transitioning from the military, I think our sweet spot is an initial kind of touch point about a year out, 9 months. You start kind of the interaction and the interviewing with businesses. Frankly, many of them won't hire you until you're much closer to your separation. But for some, the process for hiring takes a while. So I always say about a year to 9 months to at least make contact. Let us, kind of build the file, start getting some information. And then as we get closer and understand what you want to do, right? In some cases, we say, hey, look, you're going to be really competitive, much more competitive and marketable if you can get your PMP certification. And you got time right now in this window where the military can fund it through different programming and whatnot, or you can do it through one of your skill bridge or career school programs, get it covered. And now, not only are you more marketable, but you can make more money if you've got that in your place. So that's why we'd rather have that conversation earlier than if you come, hey, I'm getting out in 2 months or in a month. Or what we typically get is, hey, I get out next week. I don't have a job. What can you do for me? You're like, oh my gosh, well, where do we start? So typically about 9 to 12 months.
That's great. And I love all the services that you mentioned. Another question is, what is like one underutilized benefit or service that you guys offer that veterans should know about?
Underutilized. That's a good question. I would say probably the employment side. Or the education. I will tell you, one of the things I've learned most about, I think, are the education benefits. And they're it's complex, right? When it comes to like VA disability benefits, I tell folks, you would never go stand before a judge and jury if you've been charged with a crime without having an attorney there to help advocate for you and navigate the judicial system, right? Just like filing a VA claim. You should not file a VA claim without having someone there who's an advocate for you that understands the system, the processes, etc. I didn't realize how complex the education benefits are. And so having someone who can help you navigate the education benefits, and realize that you may be able to get certifications and or degrees without ever using your GI Bill, or if you're from Texas, your Hazelwood Act, through some of the vocational and rehab type programs out there. So that's probably the most underutilized. All right. Yeah.
One more question. So recently you guys got a grant from the state. Very awesome that Bexar County got a grant. Is some of that going towards the entrepreneurial space, or those different programs that that grant will be supporting?
Yeah, so those two grants in particular were for the financial assistance with some very specific categories, so housing, utility, transportation, food, and then the peer support programming. One of the things we have talked about, I will tell you, this legislation that got us kind of focused in the jail has kind of pivoted some of our resources based on it now being a law. But my hope is to build out our peer support programming, to put some emphasis on transitioning military in general. And so what I'd love to do, especially if the demand is there, is target that within that kind of transitioning military demographic, those that are seeking certain employment opportunities, to include small businesses, and then say, okay, we can run a cohort peer support group that is kind of business oriented, small business oriented, et cetera. And then you get kind of a mix of interaction with other individuals that either are small business owners looking to get into small business ownership, and those that are transitioning out of the military and maybe don't have any idea, but they know they're leaving the military and need to do something and could be interesting. So come spend a day or two throwing axes, painting, and then talk about small business.
Last question. What's your advice for somebody transitioning, wanting to do entrepreneurship, right? And the resources you provide, or have been out for a while? What is your advice as it comes to services that you have and to approach you? What is your advice?
Yeah, I think I would say just advice in general for anyone transitioning is, one, you can never start too soon, right? This transition, like, you know, the where's the sweet spot, 9 to 12? But it doesn't hurt to start having conversations now, right? There are some active military service members that are running small businesses on the side, doing things. We see a lot of like the crafts, right? Woodcraft, craftsmanship, leather. You know, I got a buddy that makes knives, and he started it as a hobby, just something to do, and now he's making knives, and he's charging a heck of a lot for them, and he's getting it. And so what I say is have the conversations early, right? And start exploring early. There's nothing. I'm a huge advocate for LinkedIn, right? Jumping on LinkedIn, reaching out to individuals that are small business owners, or you know, have gone through, or maybe were and now aren't. Hey, I'd love to have a coffee with you if you're local, or you know, during COVID, and you know, as I was getting out a lot of the virtual coffees, right? Well, you know, we'll do a Zoom call or a Teams call, and give me 30 minutes of your time. I just want to hear your experiences going through it. I'm a big fan of learn from what others have done, so that you don't make the same mistakes. You can learn from those opportunities. You can better position yourself because someone has done what, you know, others are looking to do. And if you can learn from that earlier on in the process, you can better position yourself so that you're ready to succeed. Well, cool. Well, we appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk about the department. Wish each of y'all and everyone online the best of luck as you pursue your ambitions. I know a lot of great people that have taken the leap into small business ownership and are extremely happy that they did. So
Yeah.
thanks.
Thank you for joining us again.
Yeah. Thank you.
Guys, 1, 2, 3. Perfect. 3, 2.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Renee told me to
Appreciate
connect with you. I saw her a few weeks ago. She's like,